There is a moment in every entrepreneur's journey when they realize that following the crowd is the fastest path to mediocrity. For Mark Cuban, that moment came early, and it changed everything. While his peers were chasing traditional career paths, Cuban was questioning why things had to be done the way they'd always been done. While others were seeking security and conformity, Cuban was finding opportunity in contradiction. While the masses were following established rules, Cuban was rewriting them entirely. Today, Mark Cuban stands as one of America's most recognizable billionaires. But his path to wealth wasn't paved with privilege or handed down through family connections. Born in Pittsburgh to a working-class family, Cuban's rise to billionaire status is a masterclass in contrarian thinking, the art of seeing opportunity where others see impossibility, finding value where others see worthlessness, and creating wealth where others see only risk. From sleeping on friends' couches to owning the Dallas Mavericks. From selling garbage bags door to door to becoming one of the most feared investors on Shark Tank. From struggling to pay rent to building and selling companies for billions of dollars. Cuban's journey isn't just a success story. It's a blueprint for how contrarian thinking can transform your relationship with opportunity, risk, and wealth creation. But what exactly does it mean to think like Mark Cuban? What mental frameworks guide his decision-making? What psychological principles enable him to consistently identify opportunities that others miss? How does he maintain the courage to bet against consensus while building businesses that serve mainstream markets? And most importantly, how can you develop the same contrarian mindset that has made him one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our generation? This audiobook takes you inside the mind of a contrarian billionaire. Over the next hour, you'll discover the exact thought processes, decision-making frameworks, and mental models that have guided Cuban from broke bartender to business mogul. You'll learn how to think independently when everyone around you thinks the same way, how to find opportunity in crisis, and how to build wealth by going against conventional wisdom. The principles you're about to learn aren't theoretical concepts or motivational platitudes. They're practical thinking tools that Cuban has used to create billions of dollars in value across multiple industries. They're the same frameworks that enabled him to sell Broadcast.com to Yahoo for $5.7 billion just before the dot-com crash. They're the strategies that allowed him to recognize the potential of streaming technology years before it became mainstream. They're the mental models that continue to guide his investments in everything from artificial intelligence to professional sports. Cuban's success isn't the result of luck, timing, or special access to information. It's the direct result of thinking differently about opportunity, risk, and value creation. While others follow trends, Cuban creates them. While others wait for certainty, Cuban acts on conviction. While others fear failure, Cuban leverages it as education. This contrarian approach to thinking has not only created enormous wealth, but has also given Cuban the freedom to pursue his passions, support causes he believes in, and build a legacy that extends far beyond his bank account. The transformation from conventional thinking to contrarian thinking begins with a simple but profound recognition. The majority is usually wrong about opportunity. When everyone agrees that something is a good investment, it's probably overpriced. When everyone believes that a market is saturated, there might be room for innovation. When everyone says that something is impossible, it might be exactly the right time to prove them wrong. This counterintuitive relationship with consensus is what separates contrarian thinkers like Cuban from the crowd. While most people find comfort in agreement and security in following established patterns, contrarian thinkers find opportunity in disagreement and profit in pattern disruption. They understand that extraordinary returns require extraordinary thinking, and extraordinary thinking often means thinking the opposite of what everyone else is thinking. But contrarian thinking isn't just about being different for the sake of being different. It's not about rejecting every popular idea or automatically doing the opposite of what experts recommend. True contrarian thinking, as practiced by Cuban, is about independent analysis, critical evaluation, and the courage to act on your convictions even when they contradict popular opinion. Cuban's contrarian approach is grounded in rigorous research, careful analysis, and deep understanding of market dynamics. He doesn't bet against consensus out of rebelliousness. He bets against consensus when his analysis reveals opportunities that others have missed or misunderstood. His contrarian positions are calculated risks based on superior information, deeper understanding, or longer time horizons than the general market possesses. This sophisticated approach to contrarian thinking has enabled Cuban to succeed in industries as diverse as technology, media, sports, and retail. His ability to see patterns before they become obvious, identify opportunities before they become competitive, and execute strategies before they become commonplace has created wealth not just for himself, but for everyone who has invested alongside him or worked within his companies. The mental frameworks you're about to learn have been tested in the crucible of real markets, real competition, and real consequences. They've been refined through decades of experience, billions of dollars in transactions, and countless hours of reflection on what works and what doesn't in the pursuit of extraordinary success. As we explore Cuban's mindset, you'll discover that contrarian thinking isn't just about business and investing. It's a comprehensive approach to problem solving, opportunity recognition, and value creation that can be applied to any area of your life. Whether you're building a career, starting a business, managing investments, or simply trying to make better decisions, the principles that guide Cuban's thinking can guide yours as well. The journey from conventional thinking to contrarian thinking isn't always comfortable. It requires questioning beliefs you've held for years, challenging assumptions that feel like facts, and developing the confidence to trust your own analysis even when it conflicts with expert opinion. But the rewards of this transformation extend far beyond financial gain. Contrarian thinking creates freedom. Freedom from the limitations of conventional wisdom, freedom from the constraints of popular opinion, and freedom to create the life and career you envision rather than the one that others expect. Get ready to challenge everything you think you know about success, opportunity, and wealth creation. Get ready to develop the mental frameworks that have made Mark Cuban one of the most successful contrarian investors of our time. Get ready to think like a billionaire who built his fortune by refusing to think like everyone else. Chapter 1. The Contrarian Advantage. There is a story Mark Cuban tells about his early days as an entrepreneur that perfectly captures the essence of contrarian thinking. In 1990, while his friends were pursuing traditional careers in law, medicine, and corporate America, Cuban was running a small computer consulting business out of his apartment. The conventional wisdom was that technology was too complex for mainstream adoption, that computers were tools for specialists and hobbyists, not everyday consumers. But Cuban saw something different. While others focused on the complexity and limitations of emerging technologies, Cuban focused on their potential and possibilities. While others saw barriers, Cuban saw bridges. While others saw problems, Cuban saw solutions waiting to be discovered. This fundamental difference in perspective, this ability to see opportunity where others see obstacle, is the foundation of contrarian advantage. The contrarian advantage isn't simply about being different for the sake of being different. It's not about automatically rejecting popular opinions or always betting against the crowd. True contrarian thinking, as practiced by Cuban, is a sophisticated analytical framework that questions assumptions, challenges conventional wisdom, and seeks opportunity in the gaps between perception and reality. Cuban's contrarian approach is rooted in a fundamental understanding of how markets work. Markets are not perfectly efficient machines that instantly price in all available information. They are emotional systems driven by fear and greed, hope and despair, optimism and pessimism. These emotions create distortions, moments when assets are priced significantly above or below their intrinsic value. Contrarian thinkers like Cuban profit by identifying these distortions and positioning themselves to benefit when price is eventually correct. The key insight that drives Cuban's contrarian thinking is that the majority is usually wrong at inflection points. When everyone is optimistic about a particular investment, industry, or opportunity, prices typically reflect that optimism and often exceed reasonable valuations. When everyone is pessimistic, prices typically reflect that pessimism and often fall below reasonable valuations. These moments of extreme consensus, whether positive or negative, create the greatest opportunities for contrarian investors. Cuban's most famous contrarian bet was his investment in internet technology during the early 1990s. At that time, the conventional wisdom was that the internet was a toy for academics and computer enthusiasts, not a platform for serious business applications. Most established companies viewed the internet with skepticism, if they considered it at all. Traditional media companies dismissed it as a fad. Investors saw it as speculative and unproven. But Cuban saw something different. He saw a technology that could democratize information, eliminate geographic barriers, and create entirely new forms of commerce and communication. He saw inefficiencies in existing media and communication systems that internet technology could eliminate. He saw customer needs that weren't being met by traditional solutions. Most importantly, he saw the gap between the technology's potential and the market's perception of that potential. This contrarian vision led Cuban to found MicroSolutions, a computer consulting company that helped businesses integrate emerging technologies. While others avoided the complexity and uncertainty of new technologies, Cuban embraced them. He understood that complexity creates opportunity for those willing to do the work to understand it. He knew that uncertainty creates value for those willing to take calculated risks while others wait for certainty. The success of MicroSolutions validated Cuban's contrarian approach, but it was just the beginning. In 1995, Cuban and his partner Todd Wagner founded Broadcast.com, a company that streamed audio and video content over the internet. Once again, Cuban was betting against conventional wisdom. Traditional media companies didn't believe that consumers would want to watch video content on their computers. Technology experts doubted that internet infrastructure could handle streaming media reliably. Investors questioned whether there was sufficient demand for online content to build a profitable business. Cuban's contrarian analysis suggested otherwise. He saw that media consumption patterns were changing, that younger generations were increasingly comfortable with technology, and that internet infrastructure was improving rapidly. He understood that once streaming quality reached an acceptable threshold, consumer adoption would accelerate quickly. He recognized that content creators and distributors needed new channels to reach audiences, and that streaming technology would eventually provide those channels. By 1999, Broadcast.com was generating significant revenue and attracting millions of users. When Yahoo acquired the company for $5.7 billion, Cuban's contrarian bet had paid off spectacularly. But the timing of the sale was itself a contrarian decision. While the dot-com boom was creating enormous valuations for internet companies, Cuban recognized that many of these valuations were unsustainable. Instead of holding on to Broadcast.com stock and riding the bubble higher, he sold at the peak and diversified into other assets. This decision protected Cuban's wealth when the dot-com crash wiped out trillions of dollars in market value. While other internet entrepreneurs saw their paper fortunes evaporate, Cuban had already converted his gains into more stable investments. His contrarian timing, selling when others were buying, preserved his wealth and positioned him for future opportunities. The contrarian advantage extends beyond investment decisions to business strategy and operational philosophy. In building his companies, Cuban consistently challenges industry norms and conventional business practices. When others focus on complex organizational structures, Cuban emphasizes simplicity and direct communication. When others create multiple layers of management, Cuban maintains flat organizations with clear accountability. When others rely on traditional marketing channels, Cuban explores innovative ways to reach customers directly. This contrarian approach to business building creates competitive advantages that are difficult for conventional competitors to replicate. While they're following established playbooks, Cuban is writing new ones. While they're competing in existing markets using existing rules, Cuban is creating new markets with new rules. While they're optimizing for current conditions, Cuban is positioning for future conditions. The psychological foundation of contrarian thinking is intellectual independence, the ability to form opinions based on your own analysis rather than accepting the opinions of others. This independence requires confidence in your analytical abilities, courage to act on your convictions, and resilience to withstand criticism when your views contradict popular opinion. Cuban developed this intellectual independence through years of studying markets, analyzing businesses, and learning from both successes and failures. He reads voraciously, questions experts, and tests assumptions through direct experience. This continuous learning process builds the knowledge base necessary to make contrarian judgments with confidence. But intellectual independence alone isn't sufficient for contrarian success. Cuban also possesses what might be called emotional independence, the ability to remain calm and rational when others are driven by fear or greed. This emotional discipline allows him to buy when others are selling in panic and sell when others are buying in euphoria. It enables him to maintain perspective during both good times and bad times. The development of emotional independence requires understanding your own psychological biases and triggers. Cuban recognizes that he, like everyone else, is susceptible to cognitive biases that can distort judgment. He compensates for these biases by using systematic decision-making processes, seeking diverse perspectives, and maintaining healthy skepticism about his own assumptions. Contrarian thinking also requires patience, the patience to wait for high-quality opportunities, and the patience to allow contrarian positions time to develop. Market inefficiencies don't correct themselves overnight. Trends that seem obvious in retrospect often take years to become apparent to the mainstream. Companies that eventually disrupt established industries usually struggle for years before achieving breakthrough success. Cuban's patience is strategic rather than passive. While waiting for opportunities to mature, he continues building knowledge, resources, and relationships that will serve him when opportunities arise. He uses quiet periods to prepare for active periods, understanding that success often comes from being ready when others aren't. The contrarian advantage also requires social courage, the willingness to be unpopular when your analysis contradicts conventional wisdom. Contrarian positions are by definition minority positions, which means contrarian investors often face criticism, skepticism, and social pressure to conform. Cuban has learned to view this criticism as confirmation rather than discouragement. When everyone thinks you're wrong, you might be onto something valuable. This social courage extends to business leadership. Cuban is willing to make unpopular decisions when they align with his analysis and long-term vision. He'll fire underperforming employees when others counsel patience. He'll invest in unproven technologies when others recommend established solutions. He'll enter competitive markets when others suggest avoiding competition. This willingness to act on conviction rather than consensus creates opportunities that consensus-driven leaders miss. The practical application of contrarian thinking requires developing specific analytical skills and decision-making frameworks. Cuban doesn't make contrarian bets randomly or impulsively. He bases them on rigorous analysis that considers multiple perspectives, evaluates various scenarios, and assesses risk-reward ratios carefully. His contrarian analysis typically begins with identifying areas where conventional wisdom seems questionable or where market pricing appears disconnected from fundamental value. He then conducts independent research to understand the underlying dynamics, competitive landscape, and future trends. He tests his assumptions through conversations with industry participants, customers, and other stakeholders. Only after thorough analysis does he make contrarian investments or strategic decisions. The contrarian advantage has served Cuban well across multiple industries and investment categories. Whether investing in technology startups, purchasing sports franchises, or building media companies, his willingness to think independently and act against consensus has created enormous value. But perhaps more importantly, Contrarian thinking has given Cuban the freedom to pursue opportunities that align with his interests and values, rather than being limited to conventionally acceptable investments. This freedom is perhaps the greatest benefit of contrarian thinking. When you're not constrained by conventional wisdom or social expectations, you can pursue opportunities that others overlook, create value that others can't imagine, and build wealth in ways that others don't consider. Contrarian thinking isn't just a path to financial success. It's a path to authentic success that reflects your own analysis, judgment, and vision rather than the opinions and expectations of others. The contrarian advantage awaits anyone willing to develop the knowledge, courage, and patience necessary to think independently in a world that rewards conformity. It's not easy, and it's not guaranteed. But for those who master it, contrarian thinking offers a sustainable competitive advantage that compounds over time. Chapter 2: Preparation over Prediction. While most investors and entrepreneurs spend their energy trying to predict what will happen next, Mark Cuban has built his fortune by preparing for whatever happens next. This fundamental shift from prediction to preparation is one of the key mental frameworks that distinguishes Cuban from the crowd and explains his consistent success across multiple industries and market cycles. The prediction game is seductive because it promises certainty in an uncertain world. If you could accurately predict which stocks will rise, which technologies will succeed, or which trends will dominate, investing and business building would become simple exercises in following a predetermined plan. But Cuban learned early in his career that prediction is not only impossible, but counterproductive. Markets are complex adaptive systems influenced by countless variables, many of which are unknown or unknowable. Technologies evolve in unpredictable ways based on innovations, regulations, and user adoption patterns that can't be foreseen with precision. Consumer preferences shift in response to cultural changes, economic conditions, and social movements that emerge without warning. Rather than wasting energy on the impossible task of prediction, Cuban dedicates his resources to the achievable goal of preparation. He focuses on building the knowledge, capabilities, and resources necessary to recognize and capitalize on opportunities when they arise, regardless of their specific timing or characteristics. This approach transforms uncertainty from a threat to be avoided into an advantage to be exploited. Cuban's preparation philosophy manifests most clearly in his approach to learning and knowledge acquisition. He reads voraciously, consuming industry reports, academic research, trade publications, and financial analyses across multiple sectors. But this reading isn't passive consumption. It's active intelligence gathering designed to understand the underlying forces shaping different industries. Cuban doesn't just read about technology trends. He studies the fundamental technologies that enable those trends. He doesn't just track consumer behavior. He analyzes the demographic, economic, and cultural factors that drive changes in consumer preferences. This comprehensive learning approach allows Cuban to recognize patterns and connections that others miss. When he invested in broadcast.com, he wasn't predicting that streaming media would become dominant at a specific time. Instead, he understood the trajectory of internet infrastructure development, the economics of content distribution, and the changing consumption patterns of younger demographics. These insights prepared him to recognize the opportunity when technical capabilities aligned with market demand. Cuban's preparation extends beyond knowledge acquisition to resource allocation. He maintains significant liquidity, cash, and easily convertible assets that can be deployed quickly when opportunities arise. While other investors commit all available capital to existing investments, Cuban keeps powder dry for the unexpected opportunities that preparation helps him identify. This financial flexibility allows him to act decisively when others are constrained by illiquid positions or overcommitted resources. The discipline of maintaining liquidity requires sacrificing some potential returns in exchange for strategic flexibility. Cuban could invest more capital in existing positions or seek higher yields through less liquid investments. But he understands that the opportunity cost of missing major opportunities far exceeds the cost of holding conservative reserves. When Broadcast.com was ready for acquisition by Yahoo, Cuban was prepared to negotiate and close quickly because he wasn't dependent on external financing or complex exit strategies. Preparation also involves building relationships and networks before you need them. Cuban cultivates connections with industry experts, fellow entrepreneurs, potential partners, and influential figures across multiple sectors. These relationships aren't just social connections. They're intelligence networks that provide early access to information, opportunities, and insights that aren't available through public sources. When Cuban evaluates potential investments, he can quickly access expert opinions, industry intelligence, and market insights that inform his decisions. The relationship-building aspect of preparation requires long-term thinking and genuine value creation. Cuban doesn't network transactionally, seeking immediate benefits from every interaction. Instead, he focuses on building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests. He provides value to his network through introductions, advice, and support, creating goodwill that pays dividends when he needs assistance or insights for his own ventures. Cuban's preparation mindset also shapes his approach to business building and operational management. When launching new ventures or acquiring existing businesses, he invests heavily in foundational capabilities that enable rapid scaling when market conditions align. This might involve building robust technology infrastructure before it's fully utilized, hiring key personnel before immediate needs require them, or developing operational processes that can handle much larger volumes than current demand requires. This front-loaded investment in capabilities can seem inefficient in the short term, but it creates competitive advantages when markets evolve quickly. While competitors are scrambling to build necessary infrastructure and hire required talent, Cuban's prepared companies can execute immediately. The Dallas Mavericks' investment in advanced analytics and sports science capabilities years before they became standard practice throughout the NBA exemplifies this preparatory approach to competitive advantage. The emotional dimension of preparation is equally important to its intellectual and resource components. Cuban has trained himself to remain calm and analytical during periods of high uncertainty and market volatility. While others experience paralysis or panic when conditions become unpredictable, Cuban views uncertainty as the natural environment in which preparation pays its highest dividends. This emotional preparation involves developing comfort with ambiguity and building confidence in decision-making processes rather than decision outcomes. Cuban knows that even the best preparation cannot guarantee specific results, but he's confident that good preparation will lead to good results over time. This perspective allows him to make bold moves when others are frozen by uncertainty, and to maintain strategic focus when others are distracted by short-term fluctuations. Cuban's preparation philosophy also emphasizes speed and agility over perfection and completeness. Rather than trying to prepare for every possible scenario, he focuses on building adaptive capabilities that can respond effectively to a wide range of situations. This means developing general skills, knowledge, and resources that are valuable across multiple contexts, rather than specialized capabilities that are only useful in specific circumstances. The adaptive approach to preparation requires continuous learning and adjustment. Cuban regularly reviews and updates his knowledge, reassesses his assumptions, and modifies his strategies based on new information and changing conditions. This ongoing preparation process ensures that his capabilities remain relevant and his insights remain current even as markets and technologies evolve. Perhaps most importantly, Cuban's preparation philosophy includes preparing for failure and setbacks. He doesn't just prepare to capitalize on opportunities. He prepares to survive and recover from mistakes, market downturns, and unexpected challenges. This defensive preparation includes maintaining financial reserves for difficult periods, developing multiple income streams to reduce dependence on any single source, and building the emotional and intellectual tools necessary to learn from failures and apply those lessons to future decisions. The preparation over prediction approach creates a fundamental competitive advantage because it addresses the actual nature of markets and business rather than fighting against it. Markets are unpredictable, but they're not random. Opportunities arise constantly for those prepared to recognize and act on them. Technologies evolve in ways that can't be predicted precisely, but those who understand underlying trends can position themselves to benefit regardless of specific evolutionary paths. Cuban's success across multiple industries and market cycles validates the power of preparation over prediction. His early success in technology wasn't based on predicting specific technological developments, but on preparing to benefit from the digital transformation of commerce and communication. His success in sports wasn't based on predicting specific player performance or league changes, but on preparing to compete at the highest levels through superior resources and capabilities. The practical application of preparation over prediction thinking requires shifting from certainty seeking to capability building. Instead of asking, "What will happen?" Cuban asks, "What capabilities do I need to succeed regardless of what happens?" Instead of seeking perfect information, he seeks actionable intelligence. Instead of waiting for clear signals, he builds the ability to interpret ambiguous signals effectively. This shift in thinking transforms uncertainty from a source of anxiety into a source of opportunity. When you're prepared for multiple scenarios, uncertainty becomes an advantage because it creates situations where your preparation provides disproportionate benefits compared to less prepared competitors. When markets become volatile, prepared investors can act while others retreat. When industries face disruption, prepared companies can adapt while others struggle. The preparation over prediction mindset also creates sustainable competitive advantages because preparation compounds over time while prediction doesn't. Each investment in knowledge, capabilities, and relationships builds on previous investments, creating increasingly powerful foundations for future success. Meanwhile, accurate predictions don't necessarily improve future prediction ability, and inaccurate predictions can actually degrade confidence and decision-making capability. Cuban's example demonstrates that the most successful approach to navigating uncertainty isn't trying to eliminate it through prediction, but learning to thrive within it through preparation. This philosophy transforms the unknowable future from a problem to be solved into a landscape to be explored, and that exploration is best conducted by those who have prepared most thoroughly for the journey. Chapter 3. The Customer First Filter. In the pantheon of business principles that have guided Mark Cuban's extraordinary success, none is more fundamental or more powerful than his unwavering commitment to the customer first filter. This isn't merely a business strategy or a marketing slogan. It's the primary lens through which Cuban evaluates every investment opportunity, business decision, and strategic direction. Understanding and applying this filter has been the difference between Cuban's spectacular successes and his rare failures, and it represents perhaps the most actionable insight that aspiring entrepreneurs and investors can extract from his approach to wealth creation. The customer first filter operates on a deceptively simple premise. Every business decision should be evaluated based on its impact on customer value creation. Before considering profit margins, market share, competitive positioning, or technological sophistication, Cuban asks one fundamental question: does this create real, meaningful value for customers? If the answer is no, or if the value creation is marginal or questionable, Cuban moves on. If the answer is yes, he digs deeper to understand how much value is created, how many customers benefit, and how much those customers are willing to pay for that value. This customer-centric approach reflects Cuban's deep understanding of how markets actually work versus how many entrepreneurs and investors think they work. Markets aren't abstract systems driven by financial metrics or technological capabilities. They're collections of individual human beings with specific needs, desires, problems, and preferences. These humans vote with their wallets, and their votes determine which businesses succeed and which fail. Companies that create genuine customer value receive positive votes in the form of purchases, referrals, and loyalty. Companies that don't create genuine customer value receive negative votes in the form of rejection, criticism, and abandonment. Cuban's customer-first philosophy was shaped by his early experiences as an entrepreneur, particularly the lessons he learned from both successful and failed ventures. When his businesses succeeded, it was invariably because they solved real customer problems in ways that customers valued highly. When his businesses struggled or failed, it was usually because he had lost sight of customer value creation and become distracted by other factors like technology trends, competitive dynamics, or internal operational issues. The Broadcast.com example perfectly illustrates how Cuban's customer-first filter works in practice. In the mid-1990s, when Cuban and his partner Todd Wagner were developing the concept for Broadcast.com, the internet was still emerging as a mainstream platform. Most established media companies were skeptical of internet distribution, viewing it as a niche technology for computer enthusiasts rather than a viable platform for mass-market content delivery. But Cuban and Wagner weren't thinking about internet technology or media industry trends. They were thinking about customers, specifically sports fans who wanted to listen to games that weren't available on local radio stations. They recognized that existing media distribution systems created artificial scarcity. Fans in one city couldn't easily access content from another city, even though the technology existed to eliminate this geographic limitation. The customer need was clear and urgent. Sports fans desperately wanted access to their favorite team's games regardless of their physical location. The existing solutions were inadequate. Fans had to rely on sporadic television coverage, expensive satellite subscriptions, or the chance that their local radio stations would carry games from distant cities. Cuban and Wagner saw an opportunity to create enormous customer value by using internet technology to eliminate these artificial barriers. This customer-focused analysis led them to build Broadcast.com as a platform for streaming audio content over the internet, starting with sports broadcasts, but expanding to other content categories as the platform grew. The business model wasn't driven by technology capabilities or advertising revenue projections. It was driven by customer value creation. Cuban knew that if they could reliably deliver content that customers couldn't get elsewhere, customers would use the service, and usage would eventually translate into sustainable business models. The success of Broadcast.com validated Cuban's customer-first approach, but more importantly, it reinforced his belief that customer value creation is the most reliable predictor of business success. When Yahoo acquired Broadcast.com for $5.7 billion in 1999, they weren't just buying a technology platform or a content library. They were buying access to millions of customers who had demonstrated their willingness to use internet streaming services for content consumption. Cuban's customer-first filter extends far beyond initial business model validation to ongoing operational management and strategic decision-making. In his role as owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Cuban consistently applies this filter to enhance the fan experience. He's invested in arena improvements, game presentation innovations, and community engagement programs not because they were required or conventional, but because they created value for Mavericks fans. This customer focus has translated into tangible business results. The Mavericks consistently rank among the most valuable NBA franchises, not just because of on-court success, but because of their reputation for fan engagement and customer service. Cuban's willingness to invest in customer experience improvements has created a loyal fan base that supports the team through both winning and losing seasons. The customer-first filter also shapes Cuban's investment decisions on Shark Tank. When evaluating pitches from entrepreneurs, Cuban consistently focuses on customer validation and customer value creation. He asks detailed questions about customer acquisition, customer retention, customer feedback, and customer economics. He's less interested in impressive technology or clever business models than he is in evidence that customers genuinely value the product or service being offered. Cuban's most successful Shark Tank investments have typically been companies that demonstrated clear customer traction and strong customer value propositions. Conversely, his failed investments often involve companies that had impressive features or technologies but struggled to create sufficient customer value to sustain profitable operations. The practical application of the customer first filter requires developing deep empathy and understanding of customer needs, preferences, and behaviors. This goes far beyond traditional market research or customer surveys. Cuban advocates for direct customer interaction, observational research, and immersive experiences that provide genuine insight into customer perspectives. For Cuban, understanding customers means spending time with them in their natural environments, observing how they currently solve problems, and listening carefully to their frustrations and desires. This ethnographic approach to customer research often reveals opportunities that quantitative analysis misses. Customers may not be able to articulate exactly what they want, but they can clearly describe what they don't like about current solutions. The customer first filter also requires ongoing vigilance as markets and customer preferences evolve. Cuban regularly reviews his investments and business operations to ensure they continue creating customer value as conditions change. He's willing to make significant strategic adjustments when customer needs shift or when new solutions emerge that serve customers better than existing approaches. This adaptive application of the customer first filter has enabled Cuban to maintain relevance across multiple decades and technology cycles. While other investors and entrepreneurs become trapped by past successes or rigid adherence to outdated business models, Cuban's focus on customer value creation keeps him aligned with current market realities. Perhaps most importantly, the customer first filter creates a sustainable competitive advantage because it aligns business success with customer satisfaction. Companies that genuinely serve customer needs well tend to generate strong customer loyalty, positive word of mouth marketing, and resistance to competitive threats. Customers become advocates for businesses that create significant value for them, providing organic marketing and customer acquisition that's both more effective and more cost-efficient than traditional advertising approaches. The customer first filter also provides clarity and focus during difficult decision-making situations. When faced with competing priorities, limited resources, or strategic trade-offs, Cuban consistently chooses options that maximize customer value creation. This decision-making framework eliminates much of the ambiguity and second-guessing that paralyzes many entrepreneurs and investors. Cuban's example demonstrates that the customer first filter isn't just a nice-to-have business philosophy. It's a practical tool for building sustainable wealth through value creation. By consistently prioritizing customer needs above all other considerations, Cuban has built businesses and made investments that create win-win scenarios where customer satisfaction drives business success, and business success enables continued customer value creation. For aspiring entrepreneurs and investors, the customer first filter offers a reliable framework for evaluating opportunities and making decisions. Instead of getting distracted by technology trends, competitive dynamics, or financial projections, focus first on customer value creation. Ask whether customers have genuine needs that aren't being met adequately by existing solutions. Determine how much customers value potential solutions and how much they're willing to pay for them. Evaluate whether proposed business models align customer interests with business interests in sustainable ways. The customer first filter transforms business building from a complex, multi-variable optimization problem into a more manageable focus on a single, measurable outcome: customer value creation. This simplification doesn't make business building easy, but it makes it clearer and more predictable. Companies that consistently create genuine customer value tend to succeed, while companies that don't tend to fail, regardless of other factors that might seem more immediately important. Cuban's success across multiple industries and investment categories validates the universal applicability of the customer first filter. Whether applied to technology startups, media companies, sports franchises, or retail businesses, the principle remains constant. Sustainable success comes from creating genuine value for customers, and everything else is secondary to that fundamental requirement. Chapter 4. Fail fast, learn faster. One of the most counterintuitive yet powerful elements of Mark Cuban's success philosophy is his relationship with failure. While most people view failure as something to be avoided at all costs, Cuban views it as an essential component of the learning process and a competitive advantage that accelerates his path to success. His fail fast, learn faster approach has enabled him to navigate uncertainty, minimize losses, and maximize learning velocity in ways that more conservative approaches cannot match. Cuban's relationship with failure was forged through early experiences that taught him the difference between catastrophic failure and instructive failure. Catastrophic failure occurs when you bet everything on a single outcome and lose everything when that outcome doesn't materialize. Instructive failure occurs when you make small, calculated bets that provide valuable learning regardless of whether they succeed or fail. Cuban learned to structure his ventures and investments to maximize instructive failure while minimizing the risk of catastrophic failure. This approach manifests in Cuban's investment strategy as portfolio thinking applied to experimentation. Rather than committing all available resources to a single venture or investment, Cuban spreads smaller amounts across multiple opportunities. This diversification ensures that individual failures don't threaten his overall financial position while providing multiple opportunities for learning and potential breakthrough success. The fail fast component of Cuban's philosophy emphasizes speed and efficiency in the failure process. When something isn't working, Cuban cuts his losses quickly rather than throwing good money after bad in hopes of eventual recovery. This discipline prevents small failures from becoming large failures and frees up resources to pursue more promising opportunities. Cuban's ability to fail fast is enabled by his systematic approach to setting up experiments and measuring results. When he invests in a company or launches a new initiative, he establishes clear metrics for success and specific timelines for achieving those metrics. If the metrics aren't being met within the established timeframes, he makes rapid adjustments or exits the opportunity entirely. This systematic approach to failure requires emotional discipline that most people lack. Natural human tendency is to become emotionally attached to ideas, investments, and projects, making it difficult to abandon them even when objective analysis suggests they're not working. Cuban has trained himself to separate his ego from his investments, viewing each opportunity as a hypothesis to be tested rather than a personal validation to be defended. The learn faster component of Cuban's philosophy focuses on extracting maximum educational value from each failure experience. When something doesn't work according to plan, Cuban conducts thorough post-mortem analyses to understand what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how similar problems can be avoided or addressed more effectively in the future. These learning sessions aren't just intellectual exercises. They're strategic intelligence gathering that improves Cuban's decision-making capabilities over time. Each failure provides data points that enhance his pattern recognition, refine his evaluation criteria, and improve his ability to assess future opportunities. The cumulative effect of this learning process is that Cuban becomes more skilled at identifying promising opportunities and avoiding problematic ones. Cuban's approach to learning from failure extends beyond his individual experiences to include systematic study of other people's failures. He reads case studies of failed companies, analyzes market crashes and economic downturns, and studies the mistakes of other investors and entrepreneurs. This broader perspective on failure patterns provides insights that his personal experience alone couldn't generate. The practical implementation of the fail fast, learn faster philosophy requires creating organizational cultures and decision-making processes that support rapid experimentation and honest feedback. In Cuban's companies, employees are encouraged to test new ideas quickly and report results accurately, even when those results indicate that ideas aren't working as expected. This cultural support for intelligent failure is crucial because it prevents the fear of failure from paralyzing innovation and experimentation. When people know that well-reasoned failures will be viewed as learning opportunities rather than career-damaging mistakes, they're more willing to take the calculated risks that drive breakthrough innovations. Cuban also applies the fail fast, learn faster approach to hiring and team building. Rather than spending months on elaborate interview processes and extensive background checks, he often hires people quickly based on initial assessments and then evaluates their actual performance in real work situations. If someone isn't working out, he addresses the situation quickly rather than hoping that time and training will solve fundamental fit problems. This approach to hiring may seem risky, but it actually reduces risk by shortening the feedback loops between hiring decisions and performance evaluation. Instead of discovering hiring mistakes months or years after they're made, Cuban identifies and corrects them within weeks or months. The result is more effective teams built through iterative improvement rather than theoretical perfection. The fail fast, learn faster philosophy also shapes Cuban's approach to product development and business model innovation. Rather than spending years developing perfect products before bringing them to market, he launches minimum viable versions quickly and improves them based on customer feedback and usage data. This iterative development process reduces time to market, minimizes development costs, and increases the probability that final products will meet actual customer needs rather than theoretical requirements. Perhaps most importantly, Cuban's relationship with failure enables him to take larger risks than more failure-averse individuals. When you know that you can fail quickly and learn efficiently from that failure, you can pursue opportunities with greater upside potential. The fear of failure often prevents people from pursuing their most ambitious goals, but Cuban's systematic approach to managing and learning from failure removes this constraint. The emotional benefits of the fail fast, learn faster approach are as significant as the practical benefits. When failure becomes a learning tool rather than a source of shame or discouragement, it loses much of its emotional sting. Cuban can pursue aggressive goals and challenging opportunities without the paralyzing fear that holds back more conservative individuals. This emotional freedom creates a positive feedback loop where successful risk-taking builds confidence, which enables even more ambitious risk-taking. Over time, this compounding effect of confidence and capability creates extraordinary results that seem impossible to people operating from more conservative paradigms. Cuban's example demonstrates that the fail fast, learn faster philosophy isn't just about accepting failure. It's about systematically using failure as a competitive advantage. While others are paralyzed by the fear of failure or slowed down by attempts to avoid failure entirely, Cuban is accelerating his learning and expanding his capabilities through intelligent engagement with failure. For aspiring entrepreneurs and investors, adopting this philosophy requires shifting from perfectionist thinking to experimentalist thinking. Instead of trying to avoid all mistakes, focus on making mistakes quickly and learning from them efficiently. Instead of betting everything on single opportunities, create portfolios of smaller bets that provide multiple chances for learning and success. Instead of viewing failure as evidence of inadequacy, view it as information that enhances future decision-making. The fail fast, learn faster approach transforms uncertainty from an obstacle to be avoided into a landscape to be explored. When you can fail quickly and learn efficiently, uncertainty becomes less threatening and more interesting. This shift in perspective opens up opportunities that more failure-averse approaches would never consider, creating potential for breakthrough success that conservative strategies cannot match. Cuban's success across multiple industries and decades validates the power of intelligent failure as a learning and competitive strategy. His willingness to fail fast and learn faster has enabled him to stay ahead of technological changes, market shifts, and competitive threats that have derailed other successful individuals who became too comfortable with past successes to risk future failures. The fail fast, learn faster philosophy ultimately recognizes that in rapidly changing environments, the ability to adapt quickly is more valuable than the ability to avoid mistakes entirely. Cuban's approach prioritizes learning velocity over error avoidance, experimentation over perfection, and adaptive capability over static expertise. These priorities have proven to be extraordinarily effective in creating sustainable success in dynamic and uncertain environments. Chapter 5: The Hustle Hierarchy. Mark Cuban is legendary for his work ethic, but what separates him from other hardworking individuals isn't the quantity of his effort. It's the strategic precision with which he deploys that effort. Cuban has developed what can be called the hustle hierarchy, a sophisticated framework for prioritizing activities and managing energy that maximizes impact while preventing burnout. This approach recognizes that time and energy are finite resources that must be allocated strategically rather than distributed equally across all activities. The foundation of Cuban's hustle hierarchy is the recognition that not all activities are created equal. Some activities have exponential impact on outcomes, while others have minimal or no impact regardless of how much effort is invested in them. Traditional time management focuses on doing things efficiently, but Cuban's approach focuses on doing the right things efficiently while avoiding or eliminating activities that don't contribute meaningfully to his goals. At the apex of Cuban's hierarchy are what he calls needle-moving activities, high-leverage tasks that directly influence business outcomes, strategic direction, and wealth creation. These activities include major investment decisions, strategic partnerships, key negotiations, and breakthrough innovation opportunities. Cuban treats these activities as sacred, protecting them from interruption and ensuring they receive his peak mental energy and creative focus. These top-tier activities are characterized by their potential for asymmetric returns, situations where the effort invested can produce outcomes that far exceed the input. When Cuban spends time evaluating a potential acquisition, negotiating a major deal, or developing strategic vision for his companies, the results of that time investment can create millions or billions of dollars in value. This recognition of leverage drives his relentless focus on protecting and optimizing his engagement with high-impact opportunities. Cuban's approach to scheduling these critical activities reflects his understanding of personal energy management and cognitive performance. He identifies his peak performance hours, the times when his mental clarity, creative thinking, and decision-making capabilities are at their highest, and reserves these periods exclusively for needle-moving activities. During these protected hours, Cuban minimizes interruptions, avoids low-value meetings, and maintains laser focus on the most important decisions facing his businesses. The middle tier of Cuban's hierarchy consists of important but less time-sensitive activities that contribute to long-term success without requiring immediate action. These activities include relationship building with industry contacts, staying current with technological trends, mentoring promising entrepreneurs, and exploring emerging market opportunities. While these activities don't have the immediate impact of top-tier tasks, they build capabilities and create options that become valuable over time. Cuban schedules these middle-tier activities during his moderate energy periods, times when he's still mentally sharp, but may not be at peak performance. He often batches similar activities together to minimize context switching and maximize efficiency. For example, he might schedule several mentoring conversations in sequence or block out time for comprehensive industry research rather than trying to squeeze these activities into small gaps between higher priority tasks. The strategic value of middle-tier activities lies in their compound effect over time. Regular relationship building creates networks that provide deal flow, industry intelligence, and partnership opportunities. Consistent technology trend monitoring positions Cuban to identify emerging opportunities before they become obvious to mainstream investors. Systematic mentoring of entrepreneurs creates a pipeline of potential investment opportunities while building Cuban's reputation as a supportive investor. At the base of Cuban's hierarchy are routine administrative tasks, operational management activities, and low-impact meetings that are necessary for business function, but don't require his personal expertise or attention. Cuban's philosophy toward these activities is simple: delegate, automate, or eliminate. He recognizes that his time is too valuable to spend on activities that others can handle just as effectively. Cuban's approach to delegation reflects his understanding of comparative advantage, the economic principle that individuals should focus on activities where they have the greatest relative advantage over others. Cuban's greatest advantages lie in strategic thinking, deal evaluation, and high-level decision-making. Activities like scheduling, administrative coordination, and routine operational management can be handled effectively by talented team members, freeing Cuban to focus on areas where his unique skills create the most value. The technology component of Cuban's hierarchy involves systematically identifying repetitive tasks that can be automated or streamlined through digital tools. Rather than viewing technology as a luxury or convenience, Cuban treats it as an essential component of his productivity system. He invests in software, systems, and processes that eliminate routine work and reduce the time required for necessary but low-value activities. Cuban's elimination strategy involves regularly auditing his activities to identify tasks that can be discontinued without negative consequences. Many successful people become trapped by legacy commitments, ongoing activities that made sense at one time, but no longer serve their current goals. Cuban regularly reviews his commitments and eliminates activities that don't align with his current priorities, even when those activities were valuable in the past. The energy management aspect of Cuban's hierarchy recognizes that cognitive performance isn't constant throughout the day. Research in chronobiology and cognitive psychology confirms that mental energy, creativity, and decision-making capability fluctuate predictably based on circadian rhythms, sleep patterns, and mental fatigue. Cuban has studied his own performance patterns and structured his schedule to align his most demanding tasks with his periods of peak mental performance. This energy-based scheduling approach requires discipline, because it often means saying no to convenient scheduling or external requests that don't align with optimal performance timing. Cuban will decline meetings scheduled during his peak hours if they don't qualify as high-impact activities, even when such declinations might seem inconvenient or potentially offensive to others. This protection of peak energy periods is non-negotiable because he understands that compromising on timing can dramatically reduce the effectiveness of critical activities. Cuban's hierarchy also incorporates recovery and renewal activities that maintain his ability to perform at high levels over extended periods. He recognizes that sustainable high performance requires strategic rest, physical fitness, and mental restoration. Rather than viewing these activities as time away from work, Cuban treats them as essential investments in his ongoing capability to execute effectively. The recovery component includes both active restoration, activities like exercise and recreation that actively rebuild energy and capability, and passive restoration, activities like sleep and relaxation that allow natural recovery processes to occur. Cuban schedules these activities with the same intentionality that he applies to business activities, recognizing that sacrificing recovery in the short term often reduces performance in the long term. The practical implementation of Cuban's hustle hierarchy requires continuous monitoring and adjustment. He regularly reviews how his time is being allocated, evaluates the results being produced by different activities, and adjusts his prioritization based on changing circumstances and goals. This dynamic approach ensures that his hierarchy remains aligned with current realities rather than becoming a rigid system that loses effectiveness over time. Cuban's example demonstrates that extraordinary productivity isn't about working more hours or handling more tasks. It's about strategically focusing effort on activities that produce disproportionate results while systematically minimizing or eliminating activities that don't contribute meaningfully to important goals. This approach requires discipline, self-awareness, and willingness to make difficult prioritization decisions, but it creates sustainable competitive advantages that compound over time. For aspiring entrepreneurs and investors, implementing a similar hierarchy requires honest assessment of which activities truly move the needle versus which activities merely create the illusion of productivity. It requires developing the discipline to say no to good opportunities in order to say yes to great opportunities, and the systems thinking to build infrastructure that handles routine tasks efficiently while preserving personal energy for high-impact activities. The hustle hierarchy ultimately recognizes that success isn't about being busy, it's about being effective. Cuban's systematic approach to energy and attention management has enabled him to maintain high performance across multiple companies, investments, and decades of rapidly changing business environments. His example proves that strategic hustle, guided by clear priorities and supported by effective systems, creates more value than unfocused effort, regardless of how intense that effort might be. Chapter 6. Pattern Recognition. Among all of Mark Cuban's intellectual abilities, perhaps none is more valuable than his extraordinary capacity for pattern recognition. This skill, the ability to identify meaningful trends, connections, and opportunities hidden within seemingly random information, has enabled Cuban to consistently stay ahead of market shifts, technological disruptions, and consumer behavior changes that blindside other investors and entrepreneurs. Pattern recognition isn't intuition or lucky guessing. It's a systematic cognitive skill that Cuban has developed through decades of disciplined observation, analysis, and learning. He approaches pattern recognition like a detective approaches a complex case, gathering diverse pieces of evidence, looking for connections between apparently unrelated events, and building comprehensive theories that explain underlying trends and predict future developments. Cuban's pattern recognition capabilities were evident early in his career when he identified the potential of internet technology before most people understood what the internet could become. In the early 1990s, while most business leaders viewed the internet as a novelty for academics and computer enthusiasts, Cuban recognized patterns that suggested a fundamental transformation in how information would be created, distributed, and consumed. He observed that computing power was increasing exponentially while costs were decreasing dramatically. He noticed that younger generations were increasingly comfortable with technology and eager to adopt new digital tools. He saw that existing media distribution systems created artificial scarcities that internet technology could eliminate. These individual observations might have seemed unrelated to casual observers, but Cuban connected them into a coherent pattern that predicted massive disruption in media and communication industries. This pattern recognition led Cuban to make strategic investments in internet technology before the mainstream investment community recognized the opportunity. His early success with microsolutions and later with broadcast.com wasn't based on predicting specific technological developments, but on recognizing broader patterns that would create opportunities for value creation regardless of which specific technologies succeeded or failed. Cuban's approach to pattern recognition is both broad and deep. He maintains broad awareness across multiple industries, technologies, and markets to identify cross-sector trends and connections that might not be visible to specialists focused on single domains. At the same time, he develops deep expertise in specific areas to understand the fundamental drivers and constraints that determine whether apparent patterns represent genuine opportunities or misleading correlations. This combination of breadth and depth requires enormous information consumption and processing capability. Cuban reads extensively across diverse subjects, from technology journals and economic analyses to consumer behavior studies and regulatory documents. But his reading isn't passive absorption, it's active pattern matching, constantly looking for connections between new information and existing mental models. Cuban's information processing system includes both structured and unstructured learning activities. Structured learning involves systematic study of industries, technologies, and markets that interest him. He researches competitive landscapes, regulatory environments, technological constraints, and consumer preferences to build comprehensive understanding of how different sectors operate and evolve. Unstructured learning involves opportunistic information gathering through conversations, observations, and experiences that provide insights not available through formal research. Cuban maintains extensive networks across multiple industries, giving him access to intelligence and perspectives that aren't available through public sources. These network-derived insights often provide early signals of emerging trends before they become apparent through conventional analysis. The quality of Cuban's pattern recognition is enhanced by his systematic approach to validating and updating his mental models. When he identifies what appears to be a meaningful pattern, he doesn't immediately act on it. Instead, he seeks additional evidence, tests his assumptions, and looks for contradictory information that might refute his initial conclusions. This validation process helps Cuban distinguish between genuine patterns and false patterns, correlations that appear meaningful but don't reflect underlying causal relationships. Markets generate enormous amounts of noise, and successful pattern recognition requires filtering signal from noise rather than finding patterns in random data. Cuban's pattern recognition is also enhanced by his willingness to update his beliefs when new evidence contradicts his existing models. Many people become emotionally attached to their analyses and resist information that challenges their conclusions. Cuban has trained himself to view his pattern recognition as hypothesis generation rather than truth discovery, making it easier to modify or abandon patterns when evidence suggests they're incorrect. The speed of Cuban's pattern recognition processing provides significant competitive advantages in rapidly changing markets. While others are still gathering information and building initial understanding, Cuban has often already recognized relevant patterns and begun positioning himself to capitalize on emerging opportunities. This timing advantage can mean the difference between achieving spectacular returns and missing opportunities entirely. Cuban's pattern recognition abilities also inform his approach to risk management and portfolio construction. By identifying patterns that suggest certain investments or strategies are becoming riskier, he can reduce exposure before problems become apparent to broader markets. Conversely, by recognizing patterns that suggest undervalued opportunities, he can increase allocations to areas with attractive risk-adjusted return potential. The emotional discipline required for effective pattern recognition cannot be overstated. Human psychology is wired to see patterns even when they don't exist, to find confirming evidence for pre-existing beliefs, and to ignore disconfirming evidence that threatens comfortable conclusions. Cuban has developed the intellectual humility and emotional discipline necessary to recognize these cognitive biases and compensate for them. This emotional discipline is particularly important during periods of market volatility or economic uncertainty when pattern recognition becomes both more difficult and more valuable. During crisis periods, normal patterns often break down and new patterns emerge rapidly. The ability to recognize these pattern shifts quickly can create enormous opportunities, but it requires maintaining analytical clarity when others are driven by fear or greed. Cuban's pattern recognition extends beyond investment analysis to operational management and strategic planning within his companies. He regularly analyzes patterns in customer behavior, competitive responses, technological developments, and regulatory changes to identify opportunities for improving products, entering new markets, or defending against competitive threats. This operational pattern recognition helps Cuban's companies adapt to changing conditions before adaptation becomes crisis-driven. By recognizing early signals of customer preference shifts, competitive threats, or technological disruptions, his companies can make strategic adjustments proactively rather than reactively. The network effects of Cuban's pattern recognition create additional competitive advantages. As his reputation for identifying emerging trends has grown, he receives increasing access to early-stage information and opportunities. Entrepreneurs seek his input on emerging markets. Investors consult him on trend analysis, and industry experts share insights with him before they become public knowledge. This privileged access to information enhances Cuban's pattern recognition capabilities, creating a positive feedback loop where success in pattern recognition leads to better information access, which leads to improved pattern recognition. This compounding advantage helps explain Cuban's continued success across multiple decades and market cycles. For aspiring entrepreneurs and investors, developing pattern recognition capabilities requires systematic cultivation of observation skills, information processing abilities, and analytical frameworks. This development process requires patience because pattern recognition improves gradually through experience and practice rather than through sudden breakthroughs in understanding. The foundation of pattern recognition development is curiosity-driven learning across diverse domains. Cuban's broad knowledge base enables him to identify connections and trends that specialists might miss. Developing similar breadth requires systematic exposure to information and ideas outside your immediate area of expertise or interest. Pattern recognition also requires developing comfort with ambiguity and uncertainty. Meaningful patterns often emerge gradually from incomplete information, requiring confidence in analytical processes rather than certainty about conclusions. This comfort with uncertainty enables pattern recognition practitioners to act on emerging trends before they become obvious to everyone else. Cuban's example demonstrates that pattern recognition is not a mysterious talent possessed by a gifted few, but a systematic skill that can be developed through disciplined practice. His success in identifying and capitalizing on emerging trends results from consistent application of structured thinking processes rather than intuitive leaps or lucky guesses. The development of superior pattern recognition capabilities requires combining intellectual rigor with emotional discipline, broad learning with deep expertise, and systematic analysis with adaptive thinking. These combinations are not easy to achieve, but they create sustainable, competitive advantages that compound over time as pattern recognition skills improve and information access expands. Cuban's pattern recognition abilities have enabled him to navigate successfully through multiple technology cycles, economic disruptions, and industry transformations. His example proves that systematic development of pattern recognition capabilities can create lasting advantages in rapidly changing competitive environments where the ability to see around corners often determines who succeeds and who fails. Chapter 7. The Simplicity Principle. In a world that seems to grow more complex by the day, Mark Cuban has built his fortune by embracing what might seem like a paradox: the power of simplicity. While others add layers of complexity to their businesses, investment strategies, and decision-making processes, Cuban relentlessly pursues the simplest solutions that achieve desired outcomes. This commitment to simplicity isn't about taking shortcuts or avoiding difficult challenges. It's about recognizing that complexity often obscures rather than illuminates the path to success. Cuban's simplicity principle emerged from his early experiences as an entrepreneur when he discovered that complex solutions often created more problems than they solved. Complex business models were harder to explain to customers, investors, and employees. Complex operational processes were more prone to failure and more difficult to troubleshoot when problems arose. Complex strategies were harder to execute consistently and more likely to be derailed by unexpected circumstances. This realization led Cuban to develop what he calls simplicity as a competitive advantage. While competitors struggled with complicated systems and convoluted strategies, Cuban's companies could execute faster, adapt more quickly, and communicate more effectively because they operated from simple, clear principles that everyone could understand and implement. The simplicity principle manifests most clearly in Cuban's approach to investment analysis. Instead of relying on complex financial models with dozens of variables and sophisticated mathematical calculations, Cuban focuses on fundamental questions that can be answered clearly and definitively. Does this business solve a real problem for customers? Are customers willing to pay for the solution? Can the business generate more revenue than it spends? Is the market large enough to support meaningful growth? These simple questions cut through the complexity that often surrounds investment decisions. While other investors get lost in elaborate spreadsheets and theoretical projections, Cuban can quickly assess whether a business opportunity makes sense at its core. This simplified analysis doesn't mean Cuban ignores important details, but he uses complexity only when it adds genuine insight rather than as a substitute for clear thinking. Cuban's commitment to simplicity extends to how he structures his businesses and manages his teams. He prefers flat organizational structures over hierarchical bureaucracies, direct communication over formal procedures, and clear accountability over complex reporting relationships. This organizational simplicity enables faster decision-making, clearer responsibility assignment, and more agile responses to changing conditions. The simplicity principle also guides Cuban's approach to product development and customer experience. He believes that the best products are those that solve customer problems in the most straightforward way possible. Complexity in product design often reflects unclear thinking about customer needs rather than sophisticated solutions to genuine problems. This focus on simple product design has been evident throughout Cuban's career. Broadcast.com succeeded not because it offered the most technically sophisticated streaming platform available, but because it provided the simplest way for customers to access content they couldn't find elsewhere. The Dallas Mavericks have built their brand not through complex marketing strategies, but through consistently simple commitments to fan experience and community engagement. Cuban's simplicity principle challenges the common assumption that sophisticated problems require sophisticated solutions. He often finds that complex problems are actually collections of simple problems that have been bundled together unnecessarily. By breaking complex challenges into their component parts, Cuban can address each element simply and effectively rather than creating elaborate solutions that address everything at once but nothing particularly well. This decomposition approach to problem solving requires discipline because it's often tempting to create comprehensive solutions that address multiple issues simultaneously. But Cuban has learned that simple solutions implemented well typically outperform complex solutions implemented poorly, and complex solutions are inherently more difficult to implement well than simple ones. The communication benefits of Cuban's simplicity principle cannot be overstated. Simple ideas are easier to explain, easier to remember, and easier to execute consistently across large organizations. When employees understand clearly what they're supposed to accomplish and how they're supposed to accomplish it, they can focus their energy on execution rather than interpretation. Cuban's ability to communicate complex business concepts in simple terms has been crucial to his success as an investor and entrepreneur. On Shark Tank, he can quickly identify the essential elements of business propositions and explain his reasoning in ways that entrepreneurs, fellow investors, and television audiences can understand immediately. This communication clarity builds trust and facilitates decision-making in ways that complex explanations often prevent. The simplicity principle also provides Cuban with significant advantages in negotiations and deal-making. Simple deal structures are easier to evaluate, negotiate, and implement than complex arrangements with multiple contingencies and interdependent variables. By proposing simple terms and structures, Cuban can often reach agreements faster and with less risk of misunderstandings or implementation problems. Cuban's commitment to simplicity extends to his personal life and decision-making processes. He avoids unnecessary complexity in his daily routines, technology systems, and lifestyle choices. This personal simplicity preserves mental energy for important decisions and prevents the cognitive overload that can result from managing too many complex systems simultaneously. The technology component of Cuban's simplicity principle involves using sophisticated tools to create simple experiences rather than using simple tools to create complex experiences. He invests in advanced systems and capabilities that eliminate complexity from routine operations, customer interactions, and business processes. The goal is to make complex capabilities appear simple to users rather than making simple capabilities appear complex. Cuban's approach to financial management also reflects his commitment to simplicity. While he uses sophisticated investment strategies and risk management techniques, he structures his financial affairs in ways that are easy to understand and monitor. He prefers transparent investments over opaque ones, liquid assets over illiquid ones, and simple tax structures over complex optimization schemes. The risk management benefits of simplicity are substantial. Simple systems have fewer failure points than complex systems. Simple strategies are easier to adjust when conditions change. Simple relationships are less likely to create unexpected problems or conflicts. By maintaining simplicity in his business affairs, Cuban reduces the probability of unpleasant surprises and increases his ability to respond effectively when problems do arise. Cuban's simplicity principle doesn't mean avoiding difficult challenges or sophisticated solutions when they're genuinely necessary. Instead, it means using complexity only when it creates meaningful advantages rather than as a default approach to problem solving. When Cuban does implement complex solutions, he does so deliberately and ensures that the complexity is justified by the benefits it creates. The competitive advantages created by Cuban's simplicity principle compound over time. Simple systems are easier to improve incrementally. Simple strategies are easier to scale across larger operations. Simple communication builds stronger relationships with customers, employees, and partners. These advantages accumulate to create sustainable competitive positions that are difficult for more complex competitors to replicate. For aspiring entrepreneurs and investors, embracing the simplicity principle requires overcoming the natural tendency to equate complexity with sophistication. Many people believe that complex solutions appear more impressive or professional than simple ones, but Cuban's experience demonstrates that customers, investors, and employees typically prefer simplicity when it achieves the same outcomes as complexity. Implementing the simplicity principle requires developing the discipline to eliminate unnecessary elements from business models, operational processes, and strategic plans. This elimination process can be difficult because it requires admitting that some activities or features don't add sufficient value to justify their complexity. But this discipline creates focus and clarity that more than compensates for any capabilities that are eliminated. Cuban's example proves that simplicity is not the enemy of sophistication. It's the highest form of sophistication. The ability to distill complex challenges into simple solutions, communicate complicated concepts in understandable terms, and execute sophisticated strategies through simple processes represents mastery rather than simplification. This mastery creates sustainable advantages in competitive environments where complexity often becomes a liability rather than an asset. The simplicity principle ultimately recognizes that success comes from doing important things well rather than doing many things adequately. By focusing on essential elements and eliminating unnecessary complexity, Cuban creates businesses and investment strategies that are more robust, more adaptable, and more effective than more complex alternatives. This approach to simplicity has served him well across multiple industries and decades of rapidly changing business environments. Chapter 8. Emotional Discipline. Perhaps no quality has been more essential to Mark Cuban's sustained success than his extraordinary emotional discipline. The ability to maintain clear thinking and optimal decision-making regardless of external pressures, market volatility, or high-stakes circumstances. While technical skills and strategic insights can be learned from books and courses, emotional discipline is a deeper capability that separates consistently successful individuals from those whose performance fluctuates with their emotional states. Cuban's emotional discipline isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending that feelings don't matter in business decisions. Instead, it's about developing the self-awareness to recognize when emotions might be clouding judgment, and the self-control to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. This discipline enables Cuban to make rational decisions during both euphoric market conditions and crisis situations when others are driven by fear or greed. The development of Cuban's emotional discipline began early in his entrepreneurial journey, when he experienced the painful consequences of emotion-driven decisions. Like most young entrepreneurs, Cuban initially made decisions based on excitement, frustration, impatience, and other emotions that seemed perfectly rational in the moment, but proved counterproductive in retrospect. These early mistakes taught him that emotional decision-making often leads to poor outcomes, while disciplined decision-making creates more consistent results over time. Cuban's approach to emotional discipline is based on systematic processes that provide structure during emotionally charged situations. When facing important decisions, he follows predetermined frameworks that force him to consider multiple perspectives, evaluate objective criteria, and assess long-term consequences rather than immediate emotional impulses. These processes act as circuit breakers that interrupt emotional reactions and create space for rational analysis. One of Cuban's key emotional discipline techniques is what he calls perspective shifting, the practice of viewing situations from multiple vantage points before making decisions. When facing a potential investment, he considers not just his initial emotional reaction, but also how he might view the opportunity in different market conditions, how other investors might evaluate it, and how he would advise someone else facing the same decision. This multi-perspective analysis helps neutralize the emotional biases that can distort single-perspective evaluations. Cuban's emotional discipline is particularly evident during market downturns and crisis periods when fear and panic drive most investors to make poor decisions. While others are selling assets at depressed prices or avoiding investments entirely, Cuban maintains the emotional equilibrium necessary to evaluate opportunities objectively and act on his analysis rather than his feelings. This contrarian positioning during emotional market cycles has been a significant source of his investment returns over time. The physical foundation of Cuban's emotional discipline includes regular exercise, adequate sleep, and stress management practices that maintain his physiological capacity for clear thinking under pressure. He understands that emotional regulation is partly a biological function that depends on physical health and energy management. When the body is stressed, tired, or otherwise compromised, the mind becomes more susceptible to emotional decision-making and less capable of disciplined analysis. Cuban's exercise routine isn't just about physical fitness. It's a crucial component of his mental performance system. Regular physical activity helps regulate stress hormones, improve cognitive function, and provide emotional release that prevents the accumulation of psychological pressure. This physical foundation enables Cuban to maintain mental clarity during extended periods of high-stress decision-making. The intellectual component of Cuban's emotional discipline involves continuous learning about cognitive biases, behavioral psychology, and decision-making science. He studies how emotions influence judgment, what triggers lead to poor decisions, and which systematic approaches help maintain objectivity under pressure. This intellectual understanding of emotional dynamics helps Cuban recognize and counteract his own psychological tendencies. Cuban's study of behavioral finance has been particularly valuable in developing his emotional discipline as an investor. Understanding concepts like loss aversion, anchoring bias, and confirmation bias helps him recognize when these psychological patterns might be influencing his investment decisions. This awareness creates opportunities to pause, reassess, and make corrections before emotions lead to poor choices. The social dimension of Cuban's emotional discipline involves surrounding himself with people who provide honest feedback and challenge his thinking when emotions might be influencing his judgment. He values advisors, partners, and team members who will disagree with him when they believe he's making emotion-driven mistakes. This external perspective provides additional safeguards against the emotional blind spots that affect even the most self-aware individuals. Cuban's leadership style reflects his commitment to emotional discipline by creating organizational cultures that reward rational analysis over emotional reactions. His companies tend to have calm, focused environments where decisions are based on data and careful consideration rather than urgency or pressure. This cultural emphasis on emotional discipline helps ensure that organizational decision-making remains effective even when external conditions become stressful. The communication benefits of Cuban's emotional discipline are substantial. Because he can remain calm and clear-thinking during difficult conversations, negotiations, and crisis situations, he can communicate more effectively with customers, partners, employees, and investors. His emotional stability creates confidence in others and facilitates productive dialogue even when discussing challenging topics or disappointing results. Cuban's approach to failure and setbacks demonstrates his emotional discipline in action. When investments don't perform as expected or business initiatives don't achieve desired outcomes, Cuban responds with analysis rather than emotion. He examines what went wrong, extracts lessons from the experience, and applies those lessons to future decisions without becoming discouraged or overly cautious. This disciplined response to failure prevents Cuban from making the common mistakes of either becoming paralyzed by fear after setbacks or becoming reckless in attempts to quickly recover losses. Instead, he maintains consistent decision-making processes and risk management approaches regardless of recent outcomes. This consistency enables him to learn from both successes and failures without being emotionally derailed by either. Cuban's emotional discipline also manifests in his long-term thinking and patience with investment results. While many investors become impatient when investments don't produce immediate returns, Cuban can maintain his conviction in sound investments even when short-term results are disappointing. This patience enables him to hold positions long enough for his analysis to be validated by market results. The practical development of emotional discipline requires deliberate practice and gradual improvement over time. Cuban didn't develop his emotional control overnight. He built it through years of conscious effort to recognize emotional triggers, implement systematic decision-making processes, and learn from situations where emotions led to poor outcomes. For aspiring entrepreneurs and investors, developing similar emotional discipline begins with self-awareness about personal emotional patterns and triggers. Understanding what situations, people, or circumstances tend to produce strong emotional reactions is the first step in learning to manage those reactions more effectively. The implementation of systematic decision-making processes provides structure that helps maintain discipline when emotions are running high. These processes might include predetermined criteria for investments, required waiting periods before major decisions, or mandatory consultation with advisors before significant commitments. The key is creating systems that interrupt emotional impulses and create space for rational analysis. Cuban's example demonstrates that emotional discipline is not a natural talent possessed by a lucky few. It's a learned skill that can be developed through conscious effort and consistent practice. The benefits of this discipline compound over time as better decision-making leads to better results, which builds confidence and creates positive feedback loops that reinforce disciplined approaches. The ultimate goal of emotional discipline is not to eliminate emotions from decision-making, but to ensure that emotions inform rather than control decisions. Cuban's emotional responses provide valuable information about opportunities, risks, and relationships, but his discipline ensures that this emotional intelligence is balanced with rational analysis and strategic thinking. Cuban's sustained success across multiple decades and market cycles validates the importance of emotional discipline as a foundation for wealth creation. His ability to maintain clear thinking and sound judgment regardless of external circumstances has enabled him to capitalize on opportunities that less disciplined individuals miss and avoid mistakes that less controlled investors make. This emotional discipline is perhaps the most valuable and most transferable element of Cuban's success formula. Conclusion: thinking like a contrarian billionaire. As we reach the end of our journey inside Mark Cuban's head, it's important to recognize that what we've discovered isn't just a collection of business strategies or investment techniques. We've uncovered a comprehensive system of thinking that has enabled Cuban to create extraordinary wealth while maintaining authentic relationships, pursuing meaningful goals, and contributing positively to the communities and industries he touches. The 8 mental frameworks we've explored: the contrarian advantage, preparation over prediction, the customer first filter, fail fast and learn faster, the hustle hierarchy, pattern recognition, the simplicity principle, and emotional discipline, work together to create a holistic approach to wealth creation that transcends specific industries, technologies, or market conditions. These frameworks represent a way of thinking that can be applied to any opportunity, any challenge, and any goal that requires clear thinking and effective action. Cuban's contrarian advantage teaches us that extraordinary returns require extraordinary thinking, and extraordinary thinking often means thinking differently from the majority. This doesn't mean being contrarian for its own sake, but rather developing the intellectual independence to analyze situations objectively and act on your conclusions, even when they contradict popular opinion. The ability to see opportunity where others see obstacles, value where others see worthlessness, and solutions where others see only problems is a learnable skill that creates sustainable competitive advantages. His commitment to preparation over prediction demonstrates that success comes not from trying to forecast the unknowable future, but from building the capabilities necessary to thrive regardless of what that future brings. This philosophy transforms uncertainty from a threat to be feared into an advantage to be exploited, because those who are best prepared can act most decisively when opportunities arise. The customer first filter provides a simple but powerful framework for evaluating any business opportunity. Does this create genuine value for customers? This question cuts through complexity, eliminates distractions, and focuses energy on the fundamental requirement for business success, serving customer needs better than existing alternatives. Companies that obsess over customer value creation build sustainable competitive advantages that compound over time. Cubans fail fast. Learn faster approach reframes failure from something to be avoided into something to be leveraged for competitive advantage. By structuring experiments to minimize downside risk while maximizing learning potential, Cuban has accelerated his education and improved his decision-making capabilities faster than more conservative approaches would allow. This philosophy enables aggressive pursuit of ambitious goals without accepting catastrophic risk. The hustle hierarchy recognizes that energy and attention are finite resources that must be allocated strategically to maximize impact. By focusing effort on high-leverage activities while delegating or eliminating low-value tasks, Cuban achieves more in less time while maintaining sustainable performance levels. This approach creates scalable productivity that doesn't depend on working longer hours or accepting unsustainable stress levels. Cuban's pattern recognition capabilities demonstrate the value of broad learning, systematic observation, and analytical thinking in identifying trends and opportunities before they become obvious to mainstream markets. This skill enables early positioning in emerging areas while avoiding mature markets where competition has eliminated most profit potential. The simplicity principle challenges the assumption that sophisticated problems require complex solutions. Cuban's success proves that simple solutions often outperform complex ones because they're easier to understand, implement, and modify as conditions change. This commitment to simplicity creates clarity and focus that enable faster decision-making and more effective execution. Finally, Cuban's emotional discipline provides the psychological foundation that makes all other frameworks possible. Without the ability to think clearly under pressure, maintain objectivity during volatile conditions, and act rationally regardless of external circumstances, even the best analytical frameworks become ineffective. Emotional discipline is the meta skill that enables consistent application of sound decision-making processes. These frameworks are not just theoretical concepts. They're practical tools that Cuban has used to navigate successfully through multiple technology cycles, economic disruptions, and competitive challenges. They've enabled him to build and sell companies for billions of dollars, invest successfully across diverse industries, and maintain relevance across decades of rapid change. More importantly, these frameworks are learnable and applicable regardless of your current circumstances, resources, or experience level. You don't need Cuban's wealth to think like Cuban. You don't need his connections to apply his decision-making processes. You don't need his platform to implement his customer-focused approach to value creation. What you do need is the commitment to think differently, the discipline to act systematically, and the patience to allow compounding effects to build over time. Wealth creation is not a sprint. It's an endurance event that rewards consistency, learning, and adaptation more than spectacular individual performances. The transformation from conventional thinking to contrarian billionaire thinking begins with small changes in daily habits and decision-making processes. Start by questioning assumptions you've never questioned. Challenge conventional wisdom in areas where you have expertise or interest. Look for customer needs that aren't being met adequately by existing solutions. Experiment with small failures that provide large learning opportunities. Focus your energy on activities that create disproportionate value rather than distributing effort equally across all tasks. Study patterns in areas that interest you and look for connections between seemingly unrelated developments. Simplify complex systems and processes to improve clarity and effectiveness. Practice emotional discipline by implementing systematic decision-making processes that work regardless of your emotional state. These changes won't transform your financial situation overnight, but they will begin the process of thinking transformation that creates the foundation for sustained wealth creation. Cuban's success demonstrates that the right thinking processes, applied consistently over time, create compounding advantages that eventually produce extraordinary results. The opportunity to think like a contrarian billionaire is available to anyone willing to challenge their assumptions, question conventional wisdom, and develop the discipline to act on their independent analysis. Cuban's frameworks provide a proven blueprint, but your success will depend on your commitment to implementing these frameworks authentically and consistently. The world needs more people who think independently, create genuine value for others, and build wealth through contribution rather than extraction. Cuban's example proves that contrarian thinking, customer focus, and disciplined execution can create extraordinary success while maintaining integrity and authenticity. Your journey toward thinking like a contrarian billionaire begins with your next decision. Will you accept conventional limitations, or will you question them? Will you follow the crowd, or will you think independently? Will you focus on what you can't control, or will you prepare for what you can influence? The choice is yours, and the frameworks are in your hands. Mark Cuban's mind has been open to you. Now it's time to develop your own contrarian billionaire thinking and create the wealth and success you deserve. The transformation begins now. The opportunity is unlimited. The only question is whether you'll have the courage to think differently and the discipline to act on that thinking consistently over time. Welcome to your contrarian mindset. Welcome to your wealth creation journey. Welcome to thinking like a billionaire who built his fortune by refusing to think like everyone else.